me make this one real. I'm just on fire. I'm on fire. Let me make this one real snappy and sweet. Real snappy and sweet. Peace, peace, peace. Greetings to all. Yeah, let me make this short and sweet. Not really short and sweet, but straight to get to the point. Give honor to Source, the Creator, the Most High, to make all these things possible. I'm trying to get my phone, get position and stand up. Y'all bear with me. Come on, come on. I'm gonna jump right into this. Give honor to Source, ancestors, known and unknown, gratitude, infinite gratitude. Shout out to yourself. I'm gonna jump right into this one. I saw something which is very relatable, and I probably will post. Yeah, I'll probably put it as my picture for this, but I'm just elaborate on it. Dive right into this. Trying to remember what he said. Like the brother said, he said, do not trust a person who is afraid to make an enemy. And the reason, and then the second part was like, because they are secretly, how did he say that? Because they're secretly making you someone else's enemy. And I was like, whoa. Now, when I said that, ask yourself who comes to mind. And the reason why this is so vital is because just the first part of it. And like I said, I could be quoting it differently, but I can see the correlation to why people who are afraid to make enemies are the first thing that connected with me with that is people pleasing. And then there's an African proverb that says there's no enemy, if there's no enemy within, there's no enemy without. So going back to even trust with self, I've been speaking about a lot about authentic love or authentic foundation, where we haven't been in establishments or we haven't built blueprints or have been given blueprints by people who we even can trust. When you look at systems that have been in place, when you look at your internal belief system, ask yourself, do you even trust yourself? And personally, I asked myself this. I was like, when I used to see the behavior patterns and the inconsistency, the impulsiveness, and so forth, that geared me away from my intuition, because I wasn't as in tune as I was years ago because of what I developed through, through the process of learning others' belief systems, others' worldly belief systems, people who I grew up around, who as a little boy and little girl, you're soaking up these things. So that hit different when the brother said, don't trust people who are afraid to make enemies. And the reason I say that, I'm gonna dive deep because I don't know how much my battery is on, is because when I used to see people who people please or who were conflict avoidant, these are things you can research, because a lot of people have grown up in situations where they have been around people who will talk about people but never to them. Or they may have unresolved traumas or unresolved emotions to where they'll naturally project onto people rather than feeling and facing their own part of themselves, which is an aspect of being an enemy of self. That African proverb, there's no enemy within, there's no enemy without. So that underlining of that is, who do you really trust? Do you even trust yourself? Again, foundations that have never truly been built on integrity and trust. So we're asking ourselves immediately, this is why it's so easy for y'all to, you see a lot in humanity, to look towards leadership and other people, or be so emotionally attached to a leader, to a person in community settings, or to even an authoritative figure, because of a lot of deep subconscious programming or fears, subconscious fears. things being ripped underneath them. And and the reason I say this is like, it's like I can see why, to the depths of the great Malcolms and certain leaders who were on the front line. And I just know they had to have awareness of knowing that as they walk that path, that, you know, unconsciously, whether they knew it or not, or I would say they probably did know that they would make, enemies. And, that's the thing that really can decipher who you are in the moments where you are evolving, you are changing, where there is a part of you that's being asked to walk the road least traveled. And when I look at life, a lot of people are afraid to make enemies. And it's not that you're purposely going out there intentionally making them. It's the fact that when you are challenging someone, when you are emotionally intelligent, when you are just who you are and being authentic, you will unconsciously like trigger people without even doing anything intentionally to be harmful. That's one of the things, as some may use the term, being chosen or selected or anointed or just being who you are. You are going to ruffle feathers because you're challenging someone else's belief system. You're shattering their illusion. You're giving them something that can either trigger something subconsciously. There was a video that even talked about, I don't know what it is, where there was a study showing how even people's intelligence can trigger people and they get angered by it, or they avoid it. And that goes back to that conflict avoidance. A lot of us have been in foundations where we have literally grown up in conflict avoidance so long to where when it really comes to you addressing people who have caused you certain pains where you were like in a childhood or so forth, you will literally avoid it. You will literally avoid, not only avoid it with the person, but within yourself. So one thing, as I became aware, I was like, yo, like, it's when you look at the world and the state that it's in and that where it's going, so much of where it is, the awareness, who can you say you can trust more than just yourself right now? Until you actually meet people who are like-minded, reflect the same core values, and more so, energy don't lie. So when we're talking about thing called trust, you're talking about trusting oneself, intuition, and so forth, and people who can mirror that back, who actually are on that same wavelength. So do I trust like the systems that have been in place that reflect something that is truly not off integrity? No. Why would I? Why am I surprised from, what has even happened in this country when it comes to certain things like the judicial system with darker people, or when it comes to certain things when you're trying to navigate certain careers or certain, certain demographics where it can feel like you're just naturally targeted. Then there's the subconscious thing or the psychological aspect of that, like trying to trust, a system or people who are in certain, when you're asking people, especially like a darker man, to easily trust, a policeman or certain things like that, that is very challenging to just accept that fully when you have seen so much of a lot of deep programming when it comes to the structural racism that have been in place. We're being asked to trust a person who is in a certain position. We're being asked to trust a mother or a father or whatever parental person who has who has shown us that even in matter of fact, I'll get into even the fact of like how I would see how people will treat their kids or certain things one way, but then when they're out in a certain setting, it will be the opposite of that. They don't give that same energy. When they're being challenged and, on a workplace or a career or certain things, they literally shut down that conflict avoidance, or, They fear the consequences, or even more so, they fear making an enemy because of standing up in them within themselves. So can you see how that again has been an ongoing thing, to where when people are afraid to challenge the status quo, or afraid to even stand up for themselves, not knowing that the highest form of love is standing up for self, standing in the gap for self, and how that ripples to other people. So again, this is why I recognize, even in a business setting, relationship setting, all forms of things on all levels, when it comes to people afraid to make an enemy, that goes to the people pleasing tendencies, the conflict avoidance, and even more so how people are afraid to be themselves. So therefore they're afraid of the family judging them. They're afraid of a spouse judging them. They're afraid of their own internal judgment. So truthfully, as much as people don't want to make an enemy with other people, you're an enemy of yourself. Because you're afraid to be who you truly are. Therefore, you will fraternize and people please and try to be almost like a peacemaker at all times, while literally avoiding the internal battle within yourself. So y'all come here and I've been giving y'all the thing about accountability. And that goes back to, like, how can you trust someone who never has held space for the parts of themselves that are rooted in foundations that are not of honesty, integrity, and truth? How are we so easily trusting? And why don't we ask ourselves that we are so easily trusting? Because when you go back to our childhood, it's rooted in a lot of things, to where we don't realize that we were given foundations. We were given blueprints. And most of these blueprints have led us to self-sabotaging behavior, self-sacrificing for what? Ending up in partnerships and relationships, and we're shocked that, why is it that we can't trust this person? A lot of us have been in settings, business, and so forth, and you're wondering, like, why, your intuition, because you haven't been in tune, you haven't listened to yourself, you avoided feeling and facing your emotional fears for so long, to where now this goes back to, you don't even know yourself. That's one thing that was most challenging on my path, is that when I start to realize, like, who was for me, and then did they truly reflect what it is that I'm doing? Whether that be a revolutionary stance of just being who I am, being, just a rebel with a cause, or, just being a man of integrity. That has been a process through experiences where I realized, like, my intuition was guiding me the whole time. My spirit of discernment was telling me, this person isn't for you. As much as you want to attach yourself to, you thinking you can trust them. No, it's been deep things to where I've had people closest to me personally, like, trusting, and they keep showing me. And so that's where I had to realize, like, in certain settings, people were afraid to make enemies, because whether they were getting paid, or whether it was a job setting, business setting, I can go on and on, because a lot of you can relate to that. I can see the awareness and the danger in that people who are afraid to make enemies because they are afraid to be themselves. So naturally, they will create enemies for you. Because that's like, how they say sleeping with the enemy, or almost like you're like situations that I've learned, to where it's like, if I have core values that are in integrity, and I realized through my experience that a lot of the belief systems that I wanted to accept, that I no longer could hold on to, because it was just literally leading me down a path of, like, this self-destructive behavior, then I realized, like, who am I centered around? What is my internal belief system? When I reflect on childhood friends, families, and so forth, you know, and I look at a dysfunction, there's no trust in the foundations. The gossiping, you have things to where when people that know nothing about business, when you see how much of their lives to where they'll be one way in this setting, and then as soon as they get around this person, it's a switch up. So that's where, again, where you're literally in the presence of an enemy, because that switch up literally, and I've seen this so much through family and so much to where they'll switch up to get what they want from that person. And if you're associating yourself with them, you're literally, knowing that this person doesn't want to associate themselves with this person or like them or so forth, they're literally afraid to be an enemy to this person because of probably people pleasing tendencies, or the inauthenticity, or even a trauma bond. So I can see how the trauma bond could be connected to the source of that. And so they can unconsciously or consciously create an enemy for you, because, they say, like, be careful of the company you keep. Bad company corrupts good character. So, in settings like that, it's a deep awareness for me to realize, like, wow, who have I been around who is afraid to create, or to, whether they know it or not, like, not intentionally make enemies, but are they really being themselves? And if so, why would I associate myself? I had to ask myself this: why would I continue to associate myself with this person who, knowingly, if I know that this person doesn't, not so much like me, but so much reflect what I am building or creating, why would I put my trust? Why would I put my trust in, said person? Again, when you're building something, a lot of things we tend to ignore, and we don't realize this is rooted in a lot of our belief systems. Things that I reflect on now, whether entrepreneurship, whether things that I had to go through to really see people's character, that says a lot in a setting when it comes to finances, when it comes to your emotional and physical well-being. Can I really trust this person when it comes to things that are vital as such, with an amount of money, with my well-being, when it comes to certain things that can happen? This goes back to the video previously before about the importance of creating an authentic love within self and an authentic foundation within self. Is your foundation created and built upon something truly solid? If so, why are you surprised when you realize that that friend that you thought was a friend is really an enemy? Can you really trust? And when you trust in yourself, your intuition, your discernment is not going to sit there and be like, hey, they're okay, when truthfully they're not. So are you being honest with yourself? Because if you're not, then you don't even trust yourself to really be and show up for you. So why are we surprised when we see these foundations in people in certain climates that literally are showing us and reflecting back that they're not part of our growth, or celebrating or supporting you on your way up? So that has been one of the most difficult things for me in this process of, like, when things that I can no longer ignore, or we don't want to see just because it's a family member, or just because it's our mother and father, things we don't want to see and accept, knowing that this foundation really doesn't have a foundation upon truth, trust, and literally the trauma bond has been built on dishonesty. So it can be groundbreaking, or almost like a grieving process. So, one of the biggest things that I had to remind myself when I saw that quote, I was like, whoa, like, And from my personal experience, I seen this personally to where I was interacting with someone, and this how much you'll be asked to stand in your truth, because it may seem like a lot of things are stacked against you, the odds are stacked against you, but if you're in a relationship, dynamic, partnership, and so forth, it'll reveal to you if this person also reflects your core values, because while everyone else is coming against and trying to project and say this is what it is and you shouldn't do this and so forth, it'll be asked of you to stay rooted and stay true to you. And that's where that trust comes in, trusting your own guidance, your intuition, that which is rooted in integrity and honesty. So a lot of what would be mirrored back, and what I've seen mirrored back in certain situations, is that I can see why that person is afraid to, again, make an enemy, because they're so used to either trauma bonding with a family member, or they tend to stay what looks familiar. So this goes back to the fear of the unknown. So in circumstances and situations like that, people are afraid to make an enemy. A lot of people are afraid to stand up for themselves. They will literally stay in the dysfunctional aspect of a family just so they can feel comfortable. And what you'll see eventually happen, because energy always exposes itself and karma always comes back around. From my experience, I literally see how when people are not used to going or traveling the road less paved, or less traveled, or walking the road less traveled, people tend to run back to what's familiar or their safe haven. And a lot of people don't realize a lot of that stuff is rooted on trauma bond, because that person's belief system is something that in their generation, a lot of elders, which you see now, a lot of things are crumbling. A lot of things are shifting and changing. So in certain circumstances, before people, you will see them afraid to make an enemy rather than becoming an ally. Or even the people who are set against you, you can become allies, or at the same moment, it's more so like you have to learn to become an ally with yourself and recognize who is against what you're doing. And typically what you'll see happen is that, the beauty of being authentic and standing in integrity is building something that you may not know at that, you know what you know, but you may not know the end result, but you know that you're okay. You know that you're safe. You know that you're secure, because that's the foundation. So you don't fear creating enemies, because eventually those enemies are just showing you that they're a part of your free promotion, whether they slander your name, whether they project whatever fears because of what they're doing. They're used to being in a familiar place, and their fear is, that familiarity is just simply gathering up more people to try to come against you. This is part of like a smear campaign. This is a part of things that I experienced, and I was like, whoa. And sometimes it can be just people who are not willing to grow or not willing to evolve, and they're just focused on, some people don't want to see you grow outside of their familiarity. They don't want to see you expand outside of their own selfish attachments. So you don't realize you're unconsciously creating an enemy, and they're showing you, again, to the depths, they're enemy of themselves because they refuse to evolve. But they, again, tend to be an enemy of you. So the perspective is you have to be aware, like, oh, I see you now. And deep down, that's how I recognize how people really, like, I'm not afraid to make enemies, because everyone has a choice to literally, we can build together, or you can choose that side and be against whatever it is I'm doing. And that's okay. And a lot of people aren't ready and accepting of that, because they're so used to the familiar. Even when like, you will have people literally, the house will be burning down, and they're so comfortable in the familiarity to where they'll stay there and literally suffer. Literally suffer. And that's metaphorically speaking. I'm just saying, like, there will be people, literally the ground will be crumbling from up under them, and they will literally stay in there. And this is how I'm seeing, like, as I walk this path and not being afraid to make enemies, that's okay. Because in moments like this, it's very vital to realize who is an enemy and keep them, wherever you want them to be, and also who's an ally. But most importantly, knowing who's the enemy, like, are you an enemy of yourself? Or, becoming an ally of yourself is also recognizing the things you don't want to see, the shadow parts of yourself. And as you acknowledge it and face these things, you will see the internal world that a lot of people have, that you literally trigger their unfamiliarity. You literally trigger the parts of them that they do not want to see. And they don't even realize that you will, depending on your awareness, they'll literally become your enemy because you don't want to subscribe to their belief systems. You don't want to become comfortable. That's something I had to sit back and learn, even through the unknown of, like, okay, where am I going to be? How's this going to work out? Where I'm going to get this resource and so forth. And in that process of making enemies, I realized that in my integrity, in my truthfulness, and being honest with myself, in that courage it takes to do that, I began to realize, like, there were other support on the other side of things. You have to, like, the divine had to show me, okay, this is not who you thought they were. As you start to grow and progress and you start to expand, you thought that this was someone who was an ally. No. The whole time, once you start to progress or certain things start to show up in life, whether things start to change financially, you start to go through doors that they are, that they could have walked through, or it was just meant for you. You're literally on your way up. Realize, like, it's important to see who became your enemy and who tried to mask it, and also realizing who is in your inner circle, who's surrounding you, who is afraid also, because in that supporting you, whoever's around you, that enemy, my enemy, is your enemy. And I'm telling you from experience, where you're trying to build something and you think other people are supposed to come at the same time, you will see people try to breadcrumb you, or you'll see people when things get tough, or what they call the lows and, the highs and lows, and you're going through these, these things emotional, and you're going through a shift, and that's the awareness that I start to see. I'm like, oh, wow, this is why I didn't hear from this person, or this is why this support didn't come. There are times where, me personally, where in a situation where, like, I didn't know how I was gonna pay rent. I didn't know how things were gonna happen. And even in processes like that, you don't even realize, like, there are people who are aware of your light and your greatness. And they can either choose to be an ally of that, they can either choose to support that, or they literally, due to their own internal battle, can turn their back, or they can literally turn away because either their own, vices or spiritual warfare, and they know that in supporting you, they're afraid to make enemies. Or deep down, they know that they're already an enemy of you, so they don't want to support anyway. And so the reason I say this is because in that situation, I realized, like, we can expect certain things from people. But then I start to recognize, like, some people won't support because they don't want to, other people will judge them, or other people, why did you do that? Why did you? And this, again, real ones will support you on the way up. Because if you know who you are, you will acknowledge who supported you on the way. So it ain't so much of, oh, I'm so independent. No, it did take me to have the courage to step out and take risks. But it also, I would always encourage the youth and so many people, like, yo, Never forget the ones, even the ones who wasn't like, how could I say this? Like you will basically know like the ones who supported you in a way that was genuine. Now the ones that wasn't, that's in a way like how I can see. Like Elf, like fuck them for real. Because, for a lot of us it's like we want to hold on to that. Oh, why didn't she or he do that? No. Did you realize like the divine was protecting you before you got or came into something or something revealed itself? You thought that this was supposed to happen around that person. But the whole time, they're going through their own spiritual vices. You're a whole time around the enemy, who's really an enemy of themselves because of their own internal conflict. So why would you want to bring that energy into a space or to a new home, into a new environment, into whatever it is? So give gratitude. That's one thing I had to learn. I had to learn to give gratitude instead of try to hold on to the fact of like, why didn't this person do this? No. When I let that go, something else showed up in that moment. Something else came in and was like, okay, we're going to take care of this. And that's the thing where I had to have faith and realize, oh, okay, Divine, you're showing me like, as I start to go within myself and face these things and realize like I have to remove not only what was going on within me and these unresolved traumas and these things energetically, these fears, then that began to reflect my external world. Oh, I'm always taken care of. I'm safe. I literally had to get to this place, and in that process again, I had to have the courage not to be like, to literally, some of the closest people to me literally became enemies because they either felt like this deep envy or jealousy that they had to be where they wanted me, like they wanted to be where I am. This is why I never compare people's journey, because you should no. I wouldn't ever tell someone you should have my path or my journey, because for one, you were not given it. For two, you don't have the tools. You are given what you're given for your journey, and so why you need to do that. That's what makes it unique. Now, sometimes we don't know why people choose to be our enemies, but I'm giving you cues. I'm giving you gems to where simply because a lot of people are not wanting to do their own inner work. They don't want to face the shadows and the things, the deep fears, the things within themselves. So they want to sit at the table when you have these things, but not realizing like they're not ready. They're not ready for that. So, it's almost like the Last Supper vibes. This is it. So, like, the trust thing has been huge for me because, again, I had to counsel out and literally remove the old narrative mentally, emotionally, of foundations where I realized that I was carrying a blueprint for a while, where I will unconsciously, have these connections in relationships, businessship, where I realized like I didn't get that, have that role model or person to support me to learn what was a healthy support system or what was authentic. So in this process of like realizing certain dynamics I was in, I realized why I couldn't trust those people, because they were afraid to be enemies even to their own mothers, to their own families, to their own friends, because here it is, some of you have a vision, or I had a vision, and they're immediately against it. They're immediately attacking it, because you'll have some people that are so comfortable, like you can be in a relationship with them, or you can be in whatever business dynamic, and you can have, let's say, this idea that can make, you rich in a way, and it's not to just focus on money, it's just, again, showing you the dynamic to where you can have this idea of doing something. Then you will literally see the exposure or eventually the unveiling of the person connected to them, like their deepest insecurities, and this is personally, like when I was traveling with someone like years ago, and you'll see how like a certain parental figure or authority figure will literally deepest insecurities, um, realizing what I realized is that they were enemy of themselves, so they literally became an enemy of their said, daughter or son, and well, I'll just say daughter because I was in a connection with someone, simply because has come along to show them something that is needed for their elevation, for the both of those said two people. And you will literally see a lot of people, jealousy or envy play out because a lot of people, a lot of elders, a lot of people who haven't had foundations that have been built upon authenticity. So a lot of things that are unfamiliar, they immediately judge. You will see people immediately project their insecurities and deepest fears onto their daughters, onto their sons, and so forth. So a lot of us can come into dynamics to where a lot of things are revealed, are exposed. And so in that dynamic with you and that said person or spouse or whomever, or in my dynamic that I was in, the more that connection start to show, revealed to me, now I'm like deeper knowingness of how this person was afraid to make enemies in a way to where they will try to people please with the mother figure, or they will try to avoid the conflict of really standing up for themselves and that partner. And I know a lot of you probably can relate to this, to where people, when I say it's very like difficult to even try to trust someone who is afraid to make enemies, to really reflecting your establishment or foundation that you're trying to build. So you will have people, whether it's a parental figure, if you're in a marriage or in a business setting and so forth, who will literally try to do anything to dismantle, to attack whatever you are individually building and together. And so looking at the dynamic I went through, I start to realize how many people were trying to self-sabotage. And even if they tried to, they still, from my experience, we traveled for a while, but in the process of that, we still created something great from it. And we created matter of fact, we created a book. But still through all of that, I start to learn the truth about that individual that I was connected with. When the quote said, like, don't trust people who are afraid to make enemies, and because they'll secretly create enemies for you, that's when it hit me. And this is something like personally, I tell y'all from my own stories, like to where that person and I had to return somewhere, and in the midst of everything, I was attacked innocently. I was attacked by the mother and the father. And in that, it's like I saw the person that I was connected to. I saw her not even try to defend or be in my corner. And that, when I start to, get more, become more aware of myself and become more in tune, I start to recognize, like, this whole time this person was my enemy, because they still had this almost like attachment to the comfortability or the familiarity of the dysfunction that's rooted in their family. So it didn't, like, the reason I say this is because it's so deep, to where you can be in something for years with someone and they still have this emotional attachment or this trauma bond to a mother, to a father, to an ex or something, to where you realize that, this whole time, this is an enemy of themselves and you. And they also secretly create enemies for you. And when I saw that, I was like, wow, from that whole dynamic, it showed me like this person wasn't ready to embark on something greater. Even though we still created a book and all that other stuff, I had to recognize a trauma bond. I had to recognize even within myself, like, I was an enemy of myself to even take on, to even put up with things for so long, to realize, like, I'm trying to convince this person that this is who your mother is or this is who your family is. And in reality, we don't even realize like whether this person's, which I knew now, like years ago, I was younger, like that they still were in connection with this person, with the mother. So a lot of things to where even when things were, they were plotting the whole time, scheming to even return. So from that, I learned through, like I had to learn heartbreak. I had to grieve that relationship for years. It was almost like a sense of betrayal because, you created something with someone and then, I had to accept, you know, through my process of like learning my own emotions and seeing my own patterns, seeing my own connections to a trauma bond, and then unresolved emotions behind it, unresolved traumas behind it, to realize like, what was my role in that? What would I no longer do? Because now that I'm no longer an enemy of myself, and I'm holding spaces. That's why I'm able to talk about this. I'm able to hold space for that version of myself. I'm able to now recognize to not only keep that energy at a certain distance, but keep that person, because it's to protect my peace, to protect my well-being, to realize like I didn't intentionally create an enemy. I recognize now that that person was an enemy and an enemy of themselves. And being that they couldn't stand in integrity as I was standing in truth, I realized that they secretly created enemies that I didn't need to take on. I didn't need in my life. And so the reason I'm referencing that is because this whole storyline is the beauty of the fact of knowing that when you are on a path or you are on this healing journey, there are versions and parts of yourself that you realize that it reflects who you are. It doesn't define you, but you have to redefine yourself through the fact of like, okay, I see why I went through this. That's who you were. Okay, now I'm able to see like who I was in that situation. Now I'm able to hold space for that person, that version of myself, forgive, accept, move forward, instead of holding on to that, again, unresolved emotion around that whole situation or that unresolved trauma. For me, I even went through from that, I went through a celibacy journey. I went through, restraining from sex, a lot of things to be able to recognize my own unresolved traumas, to recognize why is this pattern still happening. Then I realized like the unresolved emotions around it, because in that process of creating that book with that person, I realized like I created the cover art and so forth, and I didn't know what I knew now, which is a learning process, which I'm grateful for. There's no animosity. There's nothing against that person. I wish them well on their endeavors. That's the internal growth from me and so forth. What the unresolved emotion, what I'm able to acknowledge was around it, is that in creating that book, I didn't know much about royalties or revenue and so forth. So that also showed me the whole time of this person who knew that we created this together, who literally in a moment to where they just ghosted me and literally returned right back to what was familiar to them, and literally went right back to, a person and people who, again, I said, who had attacked me physically, to where I did not react. I was literally in disbelief because these were elders. And if I had like hit someone or did anything at that time, there's no telling where I wouldn't be here. Let's just say that, because I was in a whole nother state. I was in a whole nother environment. And I realized like I didn't have no one to protect me, And so that learning lesson from that experience is to show me the importance of emotional intelligence, the importance of unresolved traumas and emotions around that, to become more in tune with myself, and to recognize, like, again, had I been more trusting like I am now of myself, my intuition and my discernment, I wouldn't have put myself in that position. And now that I am, knowing that I cannot trust said person, because you can see now that the energy that they were in, the energy I was in, and now the discernment on recognizing that, because I'm in a whole nother state of awareness now. So absolutely the pluck not. And so again, the sharing that experience is to bring you to that awareness of like, what did you learn from that? How can you know now not to move on certain things like that, or and build a more authentic space with yourself, or authentic, that really just showed me for what I've talked about, trauma bonds, which begins with ourselves and what we learn through our belief systems, to now building an authentic love within ourselves. So I had to go through that lesson. I had to recognize again who was an enemy, not trusting people, and then how they secretly made enemies because they're not realizing that they're enemy of self, when they don't realize how they need to stand in their own truth, and how you will unconsciously create enemies because people are not aware or at a place where you are when it comes to be secure within yourself. So, the beauty of that is like learning like, oh nah, the past is not, I don't care who try to return, let it go, like because that's the greatest thing from it. Because the beauty of it is that even from that experience, I'm grateful enough now to have self-published. I had to go through that experience because I even learned from that how to even, do what I'm doing now. So that's the beauty of it. It's like the self-published books, I had to learn that experience, and now even learn to even, see from that experience, to learn, I say that, but to take from that and realize like, how can I be in a better relationship, in a healthy relationship with myself, so that I know who to trust, self, and then who not to put my trust in or give my energy to. And that's been the greatest thing from that. Another situation similarly to that is like even being in certain relationships. If you look at your relationships and realize like, it'll bring awareness to your relationship with self. Being in partnerships where, again, like you're thinking you can just trust these people, and a lot of it reflects like the belief system that I had. A lot of the relationships, I realized that a lot of the trauma bondings reflected a lot of the wounded matriarchal, the belief systems that really wasn't rooted in honesty and integrity. So it did not surprise me why a lot of things didn't turn out the way it should, or wasn't healthy in the long run, because simply those enemies that I created, I realized like did not reflect those same core values of integrity, or even probably had, a lot of us not even having foundations that, again, built upon honesty. So I'm not even shocked anymore, or at that time, why certain dynamics I was in, to where, jealousy would brew. Being in a partnership with someone like, and you don't even know unconsciously this is an enemy, because, I had an experience where I showed someone my art. I was telling someone, I showed someone my art. And here you is trusting in this person, like, oh, share this, do this, and do this. We gonna eat, we gonna, da 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 da. And the whole time I realized that this person had this deep, they had this deep wounding within themselves that, they really didn't want you to expand beyond what was familiar to them. Some people actually are not ready for you to be who you came here to be. Like walk that authentic path, or be if you want to say, I don't like to use the word fame, but just be well known. A lot of people aren't ready for that attention or ready to be in that. So a lot of people in certain dynamics or relationships, marriages and so forth, they have this hidden jealousy or envy, or even more so they have this deep rooted insecurity within themselves, that due to their own selfish attachments, or their trauma bonds that they grew up on, foundations, that they don't want to see you grow outside of what's familiar to them and you, or outside of that city, outside of that town, outside of that relationship. They're not confident, or they're not self-sufficient enough, or they don't have the self-security or rooted in who they are and their truth and their identity to be able to be alongside you. And I saw this, bro. I saw this, and it really blew me. Like, it really took me for like surprise when I was like, I didn't want to believe it, but I was like, dang. Like, I realized like the reason I couldn't trust, and this goes back to how they also created secret enemies. When I realized like they I couldn't trust them, because once I showed certain things, they start to literally move different. They didn't want to support. They start to breadcrumb, or they start to, they start to unveil who they really are. Like, oh, you're gonna be, like someone. They literally told me, oh, I had a dream that you was gonna be here, or you was gonna experience this, and so forth. And after that, their energy shift. After that, they literally turned into something like I ain't gonna say a monster, but they literally turned into something like that was really who they were. And I'm telling y'all from experience, look, it is what it is. They literally turned into something as if like, no, I'm gonna remove everything, whether it's the foundation, whether it's, I'm not gonna support you at all, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. I'm not gonna do anything, because I don't want to see you outgrow, us. And again, this is that also a part of like the person at the time had a child, and they will speak about how the father of the child had certain things, like, oh, he does this, and I'm like, okay. And this happened after the fact of like, in this dynamic, they didn't know that I could, I was an artist. And so after I created something, and after I showed them like a lot of things that I was doing, there was sort of like excitement, but at the same time, again, they knew that a lot of people won't be able to have you the same way or experience you the same way. But the thing of it is like, due to their own insecurities, they can experience you. It would just be in a more evolved way. And a lot of people aren't willing to evolve. And that's when I recognize again, this was someone who also, by them having a child and, co-parenting with someone, I recognized like, whoa, they also did not want to make an enemy of that father figure, because a lot of things you will see with deep insecurities and with some men is that are not emotionally in tune, they will be like, their wounded ego will be, triggered, their deep insecurities, because here it is, you can be someone who is doing something that is unfamiliar to what people are usually seeing. And in that can create a lot of friction, or a lot of people, which I recognize with her, she didn't stand in the gap to where you're already with someone, you're already co-parenting, but this could put you in a place, or what we can build together or expound on can put you in a place of expanding your horizon, expanding your perspective, pretty much shifting a lot of, your relationship with this person, business wise, and also, the child's life. So a lot of that, people aren't ready to, again, make enemies and really express to this person like, this is who this person is. And some people aren't ready for, again, that attention that comes with that, or just the energy that comes with that. And so in that dynamic, I realized like, they start to reveal who they really were, because they realized like, they were talking about after that, when I showed my art and stuff, they start talking about how, the energies immediately shift. Like I'm telling you, I know y'all had went through experiences like this. Like, you would easily see people like deepest insecurities and certain things literally expose, and like they would literally expose themselves. And with that, it's like, they start to change and switch up, because they know they're not going to get the same you. Like, if you were to get this notoriety, or get this so-called fame, as they may use, or attention. And with that, everybody's not ready for that. And so that was more like that was crazy after that, to where um, it just it became an unhealthy trauma bond in a way, because I realized like everyone just cannot go where you're going, and they, it was got to the point where, again, people were just not ready to evolve or go with you, and some things are just not meant. And that dynamic was definitely like a huge learning lesson, because it showed me again that people aren't ready to shift and change, and again ready to make enemies, because of the fact of like they're knowing that their lifestyle is going to change. They knowing that they are going to be with a person who will probably get attention, which I start to recognize naturally get attention from women because of who they are. And it's not so much of how you look, but it was because of what you were walking and embarking upon. And everyone's not secure within themselves. They're not ready for that. And that's when I realized, like, oh, now I'm getting more clarity. Like later in years, this was an enemy. And so again, and with that, it just, yeah, it's wild, bro. Because that spirit of jealousy and envy is a real thing that a lot of people battle with, that has been passing through their lineage. A lot of their mothers and fathers have carried things like that. And this has been one of the deep learning experiences for me, because I realized like how you have to be aware of self, how you have to move completely different when you do walk a path that, again, that is very unfamiliar, and then you having the courage, and then also the confidence. The confidence, even because that was one of the biggest things when that previous connection with someone, is that how I had the confidence, even when this person would talk about how this person would talk about how they had this father figure had the money, and I'm sitting here looking like, okay, I don't care, because my confidence is in my vision, my purpose, and so forth. And money isn't something that, it's not to say it's not a priority. Money is something that I realized that, as I've said before, there is an emotional side to money. Currency. There is, within yourself feeling a worthiness of living a said life abundantly, prosperously, being financially free. There are an emotional thing that's not talked about, that you have to go through that. Said to get to said success, as they say. There are avenues, there are roads, there are things, like when I look at my life, that I realized these people weren't ready to do. Because in this process of me speaking to y'all, doing what I'm doing, I know that I will unconsciously create enemies, or by just simply being authentic. Is that my fault? No. But I realized everyone wasn't ready for that. A lot of people aren't ready to be by your fucking side when you are called to do something great or unfamiliar in a world that reflects everything but authenticity or integrity or love and harmony and peace, or even just the fact of being who you are and using your gifts along the way with that. Everyone's not ready to walk in integrity, to where they have to lose certain friends, where they have to, go through emotional turmoil, or go through a sense of awakening, or, let go of that old version of themselves, that familiar part that they've been so comfortable with. And that's what I recognize in that dynamic with that person. It's like, if they were, she started to talk about, okay, well, he does this and he does that. And that's when I started to realize this, is that her mindset was more geared towards that a trauma bond connected to, like, in a way of like finances. It's not to say money isn't important. Again, the emotional part that comes with that is like, here it is, you have this person, yes, that's great that he making this much money a year. I don't care. But when it comes to a person like me who is an entrepreneur, everyone's not ready to go through those highs and lows, or times where there isn't money coming in or flowing in, or where you have that partner who has to invest into things where You know, she's in the driver's seat this time and I'm in the driver's seat. Everyone's not ready for those highs and lows, or in the sense of this person having to stay grounded emotionally while this person is going through a purge emotionally, where, you know, this time, you know, a lot of things, even when you have kids involved, everyone's not ready to let go of the versions that are familiar to dysfunctionality or to trauma bonds. That's how you develop an authentic connection with yourself and with people and in business, and something where I realized, like, okay, that's cool that this person is making this. That's not my journey. That's not my vision. And what you realize that this whole time, this was an enemy of what you're trying to create. Yes. Whole time, this was someone who wasn't with you. They were against the vision. And that's how I had to learning to not stay in stuff for so long, because in that, when you don't have someone who's secure within self as an individual, you're literally sleeping with the enemy, or you're in business with someone. They're secretly in competition, and I had to learn that. That's the enemy. I had to realize that this person is in secret competition with me for no reason. I've done nothing but be myself. And that's what a lot of you are doing. You've done nothing but being yourself. And it's your reward. The reward is, for a lot of you, is to be in a more peaceful, harmonious relationship with yourself, and to align with other people like that, and to be in business and partnerships, and to expand on things that those people who chose to be an enemy of you and for yourself and for themselves personally are just going to see you blossom because they had an opportunity. And that's how I look at it. A lot of things that come into my life, I'm not going to say I was always perfect, but like, they had an opportunity. People had opportunities to either be an ally or to be an enemy. And so in that, I told myself, I'm like, yo, whoa. The clarity that I realized that I was getting, that I thought that I was supposed to stay in something, which I had to learn staying in stuff too long, when you don't realize this is an enemy. They are against themselves. They have an internal thing that you need to be trying, that the Most High God, the Creator, is trying to protect you from. You really don't know them, because they don't know them. They never told you about, like, the deep insecurities or the deep mother-father wounds or certain things or whatever it is that they got going on. They never told you about this. So that's what, again, as I progressed along my journey, while this person talked about what this person had, I was more focused on what I was going to have or already have within myself. I was more focused on things that were more vital to me, that was a priority. And that's important when you're in connections with people, so that you know how to protect yourself in these settings. So when you go in there, if it doesn't reflect your core values, you don't have to sign that contract. You don't have to be a part of that. You don't have to do that. You can build your own shit. And those same people who are enemy, or same people who are against it, don't matter if it's thousands, million, one person, whatever it is. The funny thing, like, the divine will eventually show you, it's like, as you create your own table, as you create something that's sturdy, that's built upon authenticity. It's funny because where I'm at right now, you will see, like, this setting of these chairs. I'm just in here by myself. You will see that, right? Eventually, you know, at that time in your life where you thought that you were supposed to be at the table with these people, who, again, at that moment in your life, the divine had to show you, like, you're thinking that you can trust this person right across from you, or this right here. No, I want you to show you, and I'm just metaphorically speaking, or saying, like, giving an analogy. You don't know what's going on. You don't know what's going on underneath that table or behind your back, or when you walk away from that said meeting people, literally a meeting in your life. You don't know what's going on. You don't know what's been said behind your back. You don't know what's been orchestrated behind the scenes when you do walk away, when the meeting is over, when they go to themselves. And that same table, you realize that you're now at the head of that table in your life. Those tables eventually turn. And that's why I realized, like, a lot of us, or where I'm at in my life, or, you eventually get, if you're choosing to do that, like, you're at the head of, you're in the driver's seat. You're at the head of the table now. You're now laying out all of the food or, the things. You're laying out these things because back at a time in your life, you realize, like, as this person was an enemy, they were trying to feed you poison. But the divine stepped in and was like, hold on, not mine, not that one. And you'll have people coming to a lot of deep revelations or self-realizations of who it is you are, the clarity, and even sometimes get even a dream or vision of who you about to become, and so forth. And it's not to say like people gonna be trying to crawl back. Some people get on there and say that or whatever. That's to each their own. But truthfully, it does has a way of, things turning, the tables turning, or now you're on where you were on the giving end, now you're on the receiving end. And sometimes you'll have people want to rush back in or come and say like, hey, I saw this, and that's cool. You know what I'm saying? But this time around, this moment around, if there is years later or something where you have to interact with this person, my awareness now is like, I realize my role. So now I'm able to accept, like, do I want this person to be a part of my life? Do I trust? What is my intuition? Do I feel like I need to invest in this? Do I feel like it's worth it? Do I, and that's, I don't know the depths of a lot of people's experiences and so forth. That is your choice. That is your karma if you want to go down that path with that person. And that's the beauty of life, how, again, I'm recognizing how things return or, return in a way to where now, whether I want to address it or just keep that energy or that person, at a distance. Because at that time I realized, like, some of us, well, for me, it's like, how do I know that this won't happen again? I don't want to put myself in a jeopardized position. I'm not going to put myself in a position where I know my intuition is telling me, you're not safe. You're not what's best for me right now. And that's the thing where I learned from all of this, in recognizing that people who are afraid to make enemies, they secretly create them for you, is because that's basically saying that if you don't recognize or become aware of people who are afraid to make enemies, that dynamic or in itself will become unsafe. It will literally become unsafe. And that's the thing about intuition and discernment. I realize I start to really, as I become more in tune, be able to recognize that discernment, that feeling of like, this isn't safe. I'm just gonna back away, or I'm just not gonna respond to that message. I'm just not gonna say nothing. To each their own. I wish you well, and so forth. And literally move on with life, cut ties and move on. That's where, again, I had to learn the unresolved emotions, the unresolved traumas around certain situations and so forth, and protect my peace by all means necessary, to protect myself, to protect everything. So again, that's what I have today. And I'm grateful that I get to share it with you all. Remember, love yourself, take care of yourself, take care of your emotional well-being and so forth. In my previous video, my blackout message, I was talking about support system. That also showed me too, with what I expressed here and so forth, I'm now even more confident to talk about my experiences, is the importance of a support system. When I talked about those things, it really showed me, like, again, a healthier support system that I have with myself, a connection with myself, and now being able now to realize that that wasn't a healthy support system. They didn't probably have healthy support system. So now I'm able to build upon within myself and outwardly healthy, authentic love support systems that literally reflect who I am and who I'm becoming. That's the growth. That's what we have to recognize and realize, like, either you with me or you're against me. But it's being like, or are you gotta ask yourself that. Are you with you or are you against you? So take care of you. Peace and blessings. Shalom.